Joining us now is former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, who called this what it is, an act of war, and that President Obama cannot accept reality. Why is there this mysterious reluctance, resistance? It's almost pathological that they cannot identify radical Islamic terrorism, man-caused disasters, overseas contingencies, workplace violence. This game has gone on now for 8 years, and it's not a game.
No, I'm beginning to think that there's a remarkable parallel between Neville Chamberlain's inability and unwillingness to come to grips with Hitler and Obama's unwillingness and inability to come to grips with Islamic supremacists. And in both cases, I think that the answer in the end is that if you really believe the enemy is this bad, the consequence in terms of policies you have to adopt is so dramatic that you'll do almost anything to avoid confronting the reality. And so what you end up with are people who twist and turn and try to look for every angle, try to find some way to justify it. In addition, I think we've had a half century of liberals teaching us that you shouldn't discriminate, you shouldn't render judgment, you shouldn't be an American nationalist. And so it's very hard for them to condemn any group for any reason unless they're conservative Christians or Republicans.
You mentioned, go ahead.
And the result is that they just cannot come to grips with reality.
But that's a scary thought. If you're saying that the leader of the free world, or the person that's running to replace now the leader of the free world, has this disconnect from reality here. I mean, let's go back. I think the issue now of Syrian refugees coming into the country. Obama and Hillary Clinton have both said it's bigoted that we don't take them in. But yet we've heard from James Clapper, our National Director of Intelligence, James Comey, our FBI Director, Michael Steinbeck, our Assistant FBI Director, Mike McCall, the Chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, General John Allen, Obama's former special envoy to defeat ISIS, have all stated that, and ISIS has stated as well, that their plan for America is to infiltrate that population. Now, that tells me that the president, that Democrats, that Hillary Clinton are willing to gamble with the lives of Americans to appease, I don't know, some rationale of political correctness that they buy into. Why would you risk one American life in light of Belgium and Paris, for example?
Well, I agree with you, and I think the reason is they're going to have to give up some of their most deeply held ideological biases if they're going to actually take on this kind of a threat and deal with it effectively. And they desperately want to avoid doing that. I mean, that's the long and the short of it. The fact is that in order to take on the kind of enemies we now have, and let me say, for example, when people say this was a hate crime, they're exactly right. The people who are Islamic supremacists hate us. They hate all of us. It wasn't just a hate crime against lesbians and gays. It's a hate crime against Christians. It's a hate crime against Jews. It's a hate crime against Baha'i. In fact, it's a hate crime against moderate Muslims. We tend to forget these folks kill more Muslims than any other single group. And they're all hate crimes because they hate us. Now, once you understand that and get over it, now you're not into a psychological problem. Oh, gee, why do they hate us? They hate us because it's who they are. They hate us because it's what they believe. And they're going to live it out if they can. And when they do live it out, boom.
What do you make of the
terrible circumstances?
The FBI had him on a watch list for some 10 months. This is a kid that in high school cheered after the 9/11 attacks happened. This is a guy that at work pledged his support for Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah. This is a guy that actually, told the FBI that he wanted to be a martyr. And yet he was taken off the watch list. They didn't follow through on this guy. I'm trying to understand the rationale here. I have great respect for law enforcement, Mr. Speaker, but to me, if I know there are 1,000 ongoing investigations into ISIS in the United States right now, over 1,000 in all 50 states. But if we identify somebody that wants to be a martyr, what should we do with them?
Right. And I think I believe, first of all, we're going to have more FBI agents and probably more police intelligence folks around the country. Second, you have to recognize how much the Obama administration, and to a lesser degree the Bush administration, bent over backwards to appease the various Muslim groups so that, the agents don't want to appear to be Islamophobic. And so they're going to give every benefit of the doubt to somebody who shows up and kills 49 people and wounds another 53 or 54. And you'll notice the company didn't want to fire him because they didn't want to seem to be anti-Muslim. The U.S. government issued a report a couple of years ago. Andy McCarthy sent it to me today that basically said any business which seems to be anti-Muslim, we're going to file a lawsuit against. So you end up with people in San Bernardino who say, yeah, I saw bombs and I saw guns, but, I didn't want people to think I was anti-Muslim. Well, we have now been so lectured that we're allowing killers in our midst because we've been told to be timid. And I think part of what's going to come out of Orlando, coming on top of San Bernardino, coming on top of Boston, coming on top of Chattanooga, coming on top of Fort Hood, is people are going to start saying, no, empower the FBI. When in doubt, if they're not an American citizen, kick them out. If they are an American citizen, put them under continuing surveillance. If they do anything that looks threatening, this is a guy who the day he walked in to buy a gun, the FBI should have picked him up. And again,
but he was taken off but they had taken him off the watch list.
Which is crazy.
And he had two separate licenses. He had a carry license, and he actually, I know the rules down in Florida, to be a security guard, he went through 40 hours of training, and he had to prove himself on a range. And he still had, which is a higher level of a gun permit, if you will. And then if any store were to deny him the ability to buy a gun, well, then that person would probably likely be sued, right?
Right. Now, that's why we're going to have to change some rules pretty dramatically. I believe that no one who believes in Sharia should be admitted to the United States except under very controlled circumstances.
But we can't ascertain what's in somebody's heart, and I just went through this. There is a cultural divide. If you grow up in a country such as Saudi Arabia, Brunei, Qatar, I mean, we can go through a list of countries. There are 76 countries that have laws that criminalize and persecute, and 8 countries that give the death penalty to gays and lesbians, for example. But if you grow up under Sharia and you think men have the right to tell women what to wear, they have a right to tell women they can't drive or vote, they have a right to say you can go to school or not go to school, the men decide. If you need 4 male eyewitnesses for rape, and you're coming from that country, how do we determine whether or not you're coming here because you want the freedom that your country doesn't offer, or you're coming here to proselytize and bring your faith with you and bring your thought processes with you that are so contradictory to our constitutional republic? What do you do when there's a conflict? How do you ascertain what somebody's motive is? I don't think you can.
Well, I think first of all, you can ask a fair number of questions. You can look at their background. I mean, when this guy went to Saudi Arabia twice in the last couple of years, there's reasonable grounds to sort of raise a flag and take a look at it. And somebody said to me, well, Christians go to Rome. And I said, yeah, my answer is they very seldom come back and kill people. I mean, we've now had the San Bernardino killer was clearly radicalized in Saudi Arabia. I suspect we're going to find out that this guy was significantly radicalized, may already have been radicalized here, but was significantly accelerated in Saudi Arabia. And by the way, I believe if you're an American citizen and you pledge allegiance to ISIL or to Sharia, you're going to end up losing your citizenship. I think we will have no choice.
Let me ask, this is a political question now. Now, Saudi Arabia donated $25 million to the Clinton Foundation. The government of Brunei donated about $5 million. Qatar, about $5 million. Now, there was a report by the Office of the UN High Commission for Human Rights, and it was called Discrimination and Violence Against Individuals Based on Sexual Orientation or Gender. And what they found is that, for example, Saudi Arabia, if you look at their background, they have Qatar, for example, is in a league of its own when they are one of 10 nations that allow the execution of gay people. But Hillary took the money. Hillary took the money from Saudi Arabia, and it's a crime to be gay in Saudi Arabia. And same thing with Nigeria, same thing with Brunei, all these countries that gave the Clinton Foundation money. Now, she claims to be a champion of women's rights and gay and lesbian rights. She takes the money from these countries. I can't find on the record any criticism of any of these countries that paid millions to the Clintons of their atrocious human rights record. Did they buy her silence?
Well, I think the influence of the Saudis in particular and the sheer scale of oil money they've had over the last 40 years permeates Washington. I mean, nobody should kid themselves. They permeate many of our universities. I mean, one of the things we should be requiring is the universities indicate where they get their donations from, including indirect. So, so if the Saudis give money to some supposed American foundation, which promptly gives the money to a university, that should be traced all the way back to the Saudis. But I think we would be startled how much money has come into the U.S. from these kind of organizations.
Well, this has to stop.
Brainwashing us.
Well, I think it's that, and it's also based on America's stupidity not to achieve energy independence, isn't it? I mean, three issues are at play here in terms of the Trump agenda versus the Hillary agenda. Number one, Syrian refugees. He supports safe zones, that we would help support people with food and blankets and water and medicine and supplies, but it's where they live, and military assistance. You know, Hillary wants them and is insisting we bring them here or we're bigoted, just like the president is saying that. The second issue is we have more and more Border Patrol agents saying that Middle Eastern people are crossing the border. And this other issue that we're talking about here, why are we not energy independent and tell the Saudis to keep their money and shove it?
Well, look, I think you're exactly right. And I think that we have an obligation. That's part of what campaigns are about, is having the discussion and bringing to the forefront what people need to understand about the choices we're going to live out as a country. And I think that it's an enormous problem for the United States right now. And we need to confront how big a problem it is. And I think that the only way to deal with that is to have a straight-up debate. You know, Obama and Clinton have represented one view. I do note that under extraordinary pressure in the last 24 hours, she's begun to crumble a little bit.
But it's not real, like everything else. She once refused to say. I actually have the tapes of it. Refused to acknowledge radical Islam. What did you think of Trump's speech? I got to run, and you're going to be on TV tonight. What did you think of Trump's speech today?
I thought it was extraordinary, and I think it sets a benchmark on national security that people are going to really draw a sharp contrast with Clinton and Obama.
Mm-hmm. I tend to agree with you. All right, former Speaker of the House.
All right, see you tonight.
Potential vice presidential candidate.
Don't give me that. Talk to you later.
You know, I never had a guest just give me so much crap as he does. But I'm asking simple questions, and he gets on that one in particular.